Kia ora, Cosmigos. Welcome back to the Cosmic Banter podcast. Welcome back not only to a new episode, but to a new season. This is season 2, episode 22, 222. Last week I published the fourth and final part of my interview series with Brock, mass supernatural experiencer Brock, titled The Melbourne Dogman and the Giant Owl. If you're into alien abductions, UFO stories, doppelgangers, cryptid creatures, then that 4-part series with Brock it'll be right up your alley. Go and check it out if you haven't already. Tonight, we're kicking off season 2 with a fairly prominent guest, actually, Dr. Roger Stankovic. Roger, by trade, I guess, by profession, is a neuroscientist. So, he's pretty well credentialed, hence the doctor. More pertinently for us, he's also the New Zealand and Australia director for MUFON. MUFON being the Mutual UFO Network. Roger and I have a really wide-ranging discussion. We recorded for 3 hours. Don't worry, I've edited that down. And we actually, Roger, if you're watching, you'll recall we spoke for another 2-3 hours after the interview, because I just needed to pick this guy's brain on the subject. He's so well versed. If being the New Zealand Australia director for MUFON and a neuroscientist by trade wasn't enough, Roger is also a personal experiencer himself, having had a contact event when he was a young boy. So you'll hear about that as well. Some of the stuff we talk about, most of it is sort of broadly around the supernatural UFO subject. A lot of it is the historical stuff. Some of it was more current day stuff. And it would be remiss of me not to mention this was recorded in April of 2025. I'm now sat here recording this intro in mid-March of 2026, so almost a full year after the fact, just for reference. Whether you're new to the subject or whether you're already well versed, there's something for everyone in this episode. For a potential part 2, we had a really interesting discussion on a New Zealand incident that occurred 10 to 15 years ago. I just need to do a little bit more research on that. It's a bit of a sensitive story, so I'm not sure how I'm going to work that yet, but anyway, there's a little teaser for you. In the meantime, let's just kick straight in. If you're new here, please subscribe on YouTube, comment, like, and likewise on Spotify. Please follow, please rate 5 stars, especially at this nascent stage of the podcast journey. It's all incredibly helpful. If you're so inclined as well, I'd be forever grateful for any donations. There are donation links for credit card, debit card, and cryptocurrency payment options in the show notes. Okay, as ever, when the phenomenon decides to reach you, I hope that you decide to reach out to Cosmic Banter. This is season 2, episode 22. Enjoy. Peace. Welcome back to the Cosmic Banter podcast. I have here with me this evening Roger Stankovic, who is the director of MUFON, Australia and New Zealand, the Mutual UFO Network. Roger, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing tonight?
Good, Steve. Yeah, pretty good. How are you going over there?
I'm good. You said to keep it rolling. We were having a good old fashioned yarn before this, and I've just made it all formalized. So I already know that you're doing well. You're based are you in Sydney?
Yeah, I'm about 120k south of Sydney. Yeah, so we've been here for about 8 years now, 7-8 years.
Yeah, brilliant. Roger, I just want to start by perhaps I'll get you to explain a wee bit about your background. But MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, I would wager a good chunk of my, albeit small, subscribership probably hasn't heard of MUFON. So I'll get you to just give some background on yourself, who you are, and perhaps your education background as well, and then how you got into the UFO subject, and a little bit about what MUFON is and what you do at MUFON.
Yeah, so as a teenager, I mean, I'm a pretty well a blank slate when it comes to UFOs. As a kid, apart from watching cartoons and seeing, Marty the Martian and whatever. But when I was about 15, I saw what I believe was a UFO on my parents' property, which my parents had a quite a large acreage west of Sydney. They were market gardeners, and so we had about 10 hectares, which is about translates to 25 acres, which we would have cattle on, and we'd also have a vegetable market garden there. And being in the western suburbs of Sydney, in a rural area, as a teenager, that gets pretty boring. So I would spend most of my time going down the paddock and going to the dams and collecting frogs and whatever. And one evening, I was down at the bottom dam. There was two dams, and basically it was sort of like twilight, getting dark, and I spotted a light coming from the south slowly, and thought, oh, that might be a plane. I just caught it in the corner of my eye. I wasn't even looking at it. I was looking, at the dam, at the hill and whatever, skipping stones on the dam. And then basically this light came over, and it came, like, stopped in front of me at about the 300 meters away, and started to enlarge to about a 5-cent coin at arm's length. And I thought, what in hell is that? What on earth is that? No noise, not a helicopter, not a plane, not a meteorite, too slow. So no celestial object, couldn't explain it. And a sudden sort of like curiosity, but also fear came into me, thinking, what the hell is that? What is it going to do? And then it's did a maneuver which I cannot remember. It was quite a while ago. So I don't know whether it did a figure eight or whether it did this like a quick maneuver. And I thought, oh, okay, definitely not a plane, definitely not man-made. And then it shot down to the ground and landed. And as far as I can remember, it lit up the area as if it was daylight. So just a flash, and I could have stayed there and just observed it, but the whole incident was so shocking and frightening for me that I just took off and ran to the farmhouse and never looked back, because I thought, oh my God, I don't know what that is. And I did think, is it extraterrestrial? So basically I thought, I'm here alone and this thing's here with me. What is it doing? What does it want to do with me? So I just took off and rushed into the house and, pushed the door of the kitchen, and my parents were there and my sister was there. And then she said, a couple of years ago, I asked my sister whether she remembered that incident. She says, you looked like a ghost. You were white, you were sweating, you were panting. And so she remembers it. And I told the kids at school about it. And ever since that day, I was obsessed with UFOs. So I would, as I progressed through high school and went to uni, I'd be looking at UFO books all the time, reading UFO books. And obviously that affected my studies as well, because that's all I would read, get the magazines, you read the UFO magazines, read books, obsessed with it and try to figure out, what did I just go through, So no, there was no encounter or anything like that, but it was very close. It was a close encounter, but nothing came out of the object. Nothing. It was like an orb, like a white orb. So that got me really interested in and also obsessed, but also there's a trepidation about it, which I still thought, well, like I'm scared about this thing, but I want to study it, so that's why I got involved in it. And I tend to get obsessed with things that scare me for some strange reason. I think a lot of people do, like you want to find out what is going on here, So basically, then quite a bit of time passed. So all I was doing was reading books, watching videos, etc., etc., etc. So I never really got involved in actually actively investigating UFOs till much later. But I was a member of AARO, which is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, which was run by the Coral Lorenz and her husband, which was quite a while ago as a teenager. But it was part of it obviously closed down years and years ago. But it was part of an organization prior to MUFON, actually. So and I think I don't know when they stopped investigating, or they might have morphed into NICAP. I'm not quite sure. But there's several UFO organizations out there. But you can join a UFO organization, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be an investigator. But I wanted to investigate. So in 2015, basically, I started looking at which UFO organization. Well, I went to UFO conferences, just meetings. And then I thought, I really want to get involved in investigation because I want to, I want to interview witnesses and I want to, work with a database and whatever. So I found MUFON, which is, as you mentioned, Mutual UFO Network, which I never heard of. Because I heard of AARO, but I never heard of MUFON. And so that allows people as civilians to actually get involved. So you can actually join MUFON and then you can become a field investigator. There's a training schedule. You have to pay for membership, unfortunately. You have to pay for the manual, but you've got to study it, and then you've got to pass an exam by 80%. So once you've done that, you become a trainee field investigator, and then so they train you up so you have the tools and the mechanisms to be able to actually interview people, get as much information as you can out of them, discern whether they're credible or not, investigate any evidence in terms of video, photographs, physical evidence, if there is any, which there isn't a lot of the time. So it's a bit of a misnomer saying that you're a field investigator, because most of the time you're actually, calling someone, discussing with them their encounter or whatever they saw. So basically, it involves most of the time Zooming someone, calling them, or emailing them, etc., and getting as much information as you can about their experience and determining whether they had actually seen something prosaic, whether it was it could have been a helicopter, could have been a plane. You can go through Flight Radar 24, and what we're doing is eliminating all the possible things that they could have seen that might not be might be prosaic. There's a prosaic explanation for it. If we can't do that, we've gone through everything, then we call it an unknown, which means it's probably, it could be an extraterrestrial vehicle that they've seen, photographed, videoed, or it could be an entity that they've seen, whatever. So basically I got involved in MUFON, and then I got promoted to director very quickly.
What age, Roger, what age did you join MUFON?
What age?
What age did you join MUFON?
I would have been in my 40s, I think.
Okay, so this is quite a bit later on in life.
Yeah, quite a lot later on, yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to sort of just go back a wee bit. So there's, as you say, quite a bit of time has passed since your first encounter.
Yeah, mainly because there were no MUFON existed in Australia in I think the 80s, but very few people knew about it.
Yeah.
And I know that there's researchers out there, like Bill Chalker and there's Keith Basterfield, who are the legends in ufology in Australia. I know both of them fairly well. There's new people coming out like Grant Levac, who are doing FOIAs and whatever. But you had to really be in the know, and you had to go to meetings to find out, where are these? There were lots of organisations around in Australia, like for quite some time. You're going back to the 50s. We've got the Queensland, UFO organisation, which is run by Cheryl Gottschall, which was dating back to 1956 or something like that. But the thing is that I wanted to get involved, not just go to meetings, but I wanted to actually, get physically involved in terms of actually, interviewing witnesses. MUFON only does that. So you have other organisations that people report to, but we get most of the reports in Australia by far. We get 95% of the reports in Australia and New Zealand.
And it's a global network, isn't it?
It's a global network, and basically, like the bases in the States, they've moved to Ohio now, but the bases in the United States, they've got a server there with the database on it, and we work off that server. So no matter where you are in the world, so you work off that server. So whatever case is entered into the server, even if it's someone from Australia or Africa or Germany or wherever.
Yes.
They type their information into that server, then the information gets sent, divvied out to the various nations. So it's not as if MUFON is a separate entity in each country.
No. Yeah, right. And that makes sense. You mentioned sort of a rough number, 95% of all reported cases in sort of Australia and New Zealand go to MUFON. That would, sort of sound about right. As from what I understand about MUFON is sort of, it's if you're interested in the subject, they're pretty well renowned. Would you also say that's the case globally, that most reported cases go to a local chapter of MUFON?
Most of the time. I mean, there's other organisations like NICAP, and there's another organisation that gets an awful lot of reports, but MUFON will get the majority. MUFON was created in 1969 as a result of the closure of Project Blue Book. So it was a civilian, So what happened? We had the
Can you just because I'm very conscious of the different people in my audience, and some are just curious, they know nothing, and others are perhaps, more knowledgeable than you and I, who knows. But can you please explain, you may have been going to already, what was Project Blue Book?
Yeah, so Project Blue Book was the third attempt by the United States Air Force to look at UFOs. The first project was Project Sign, and that project was an official Air Force investigation into the UFO phenomenon, predating 1952, I believe. So what happened there is that they got a bunch of scientists together to look at this phenomenon. And the scientists concluded, after looking at several cases, that UFOs were extraterrestrial objects. But the actual the leader of the team, for use of a better word, was I think it was Vandenberg, but I forgot his first name, Vandenberg. He was, I think, high up in the military, in the Air Force. He was probably a commander in the United States Air Force. Rejected their conclusion. So he closed down Project Sign. Then they opened up what was called Project Grudge, which went on for a couple of years. That was closed down, and then Project Blue Book started, involving J. Allen Hynek. So J. Allen Hynek was an astronomer that was placed in that position to actually look at the phenomenon. And Project Blue Book was the third project that the United States Air Force got together to look at it at a scientific perspective, because we had J. Allen Hynek. I know his son very well. Basically,
do you?
I do, yes.
Wow.
I met him at a conference, yeah.
That's neat.
So Hynek was born in 1911, I believe, but he had this particular, he had his son. He had, I don't know how many kids he had, but his youngest is, he'd be only about 60 years old now. So he probably had him when he was 60. So his son's still quite young. So basically, so J. Allen Hynek looked at these cases, and then he concluded that later on, he had to make up a lot of the audience would know about swamp gas. He coined the term swamp gas. So he, in the background, he had, in the back of his head, he thought UFOs were possibly extraterrestrial objects, but the Air Force sort of put a lid on it and said, Alan, do not do this, we want to keep a lid on this. We don't want to scare the public. So he had to come up with all these other things. But when he got out of Project Blue Book, he got interviewed several times, and he said he was adamant that, the Socorro incident, where a UFO landed and they had trace evidence. Lonnie Zamora actually went to the site. So I went overseas recently last year, and I went to all these UFO crash sites, and we actually went to the site where J. Allen Hynek had been, at the Socorro landing. And so after Project Blue Book, so where was I going? So basically I was talking about how MUFON started. So after Project Blue Book was finished, it was terminated, and it was run by a guy called Condon, Condon, C-O-N-D-O-N. And basically he was a big debunker, and he concluded that there was nothing to this UFO phenomenon. The Air Force had done its job, so they closed down Project Blue Book, but there was a huge public resistance to the conclusion that the UFO phenomenon was nothing, really, nothing to it. No, we don't want to spend more money looking at this thing because we've got better things to do. We've got, more important things to put our money into. So there was a public backlash. So what happened is that MUFON spawned out of that conflict between what the public was thinking, this is rubbish. There's a lot of evidence there that hasn't been, dealt with properly. They concluded that there were 21% of those cases which they couldn't conclude to be anything other than an unknown. So that's how MUFON started. And so ever since 1969, we've been going. As I said, I joined in 2015, and basically I only found out about MUFON very much later after my sighting, and because there was nothing else. There's no way you could have got involved in ufology, other than, going on TV and saying that you're a ufologist and said, I've interviewed 200 people, or I've got photographic evidence, and, I'm an expert in this field. Really, there's ways and means of getting into ufology, but I did it through MUFON, whereas other people do it through other ways. So I know that I mentioned Bill Chalker. He went through MUFON. So did Keith Basterfield. Grant actually went through FOIAing. So he actually did a lot of work on FOIAing documents, so freedom of information. So you can get into ufology in many different ways. I mean, there's people around which have multiple sightings. They take photographic evidence. And these people, these individuals say that they're, like they're constantly in contact with, they can always see UFOs and take photos. You can get into it that way if people believe you. Like, I mean, your photos could be just rubbish, And, people also get into ufology by looking at interviewing people that have had experiences that come to them. So, for example, abductees, et cetera, or they may get into crop circles or cattle mutilations or, missing people, whatever. But I got into it through MUFON, and that's how I became, I don't know whether I could call myself a ufologist. I suppose I could, but certainly not.
Certainly not what?
Well, I don't know whether I'm professional. I like, I could say I'm what do you call a professional ufologist? I don't, a lot of the time I don't get paid for anything, but I mean, I do get occasionally paid when I go and do a seminar. But it's just a minor thing, and I don't expect it, and I don't really want it. I'm not a grifter, so basically, I'm just in for it for the interest. I want to impart knowledge and discuss it with the general public. Basically, that's all I'm out there for.
Well, I think that says a lot, because you use the word grifter. That's been thrown around a wee bit on UFO Twitter at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, like point the finger at certain people saying you're a grifter, blah, 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 blah. I think genuinely a lot of people actually are interested in the topic, but some people want to get money out of it. I'm not in that situation, to be honest. I'm fairly well off. I mean, I don't really need the money, and neither would I want to, I suppose, if
look at your bedroom.
I had the opportunity, really. Sorry?
Your bedroom's beautiful. You must be. You must be killing. You must be doing well. No, it's perfectly scented, which I appreciate as well. Sidebar, we'll cut that out. No, we'll leave that in. That's really interesting, Roger. And I didn't. Well, I must have read it somewhere or seen it on a documentary, but I guess I forgot that that MUFON was birthed from Project Blue Book. That's so fascinating, that its origins. And you used. You said someone or other Condon. I'd heard that name as well. That rang a bell.
Yeah.
This is, was it Edward Condon?
Edward Condon, yeah.
Right. So he worked for Project Blue Book, and
he was in charge of Project Blue Book in a way that he was part of the Robertson panel. So basically, there were a group of scientists which had to, I think they were from a university, but I can't remember whether it was the University of Colorado or whatever. They were put together because the Battelle Institute actually was involved in analysing a lot of the cases from Project Blue Book, sorry. So Battelle Institute was involved, and also the Robertson panel was a group of scientists that were put together, so-called scientists, and to analyze, to make a decision about, because your projects don't go on forever. You got Project Moondust, or whatever project the government does, it's not going to go on forever. It's there's a goal that they have to achieve. So basically, Project Blue Book wasn't going to go on forever, even though they couldn't get a definitive answer about the phenomenon, which we still can't, after 80 years or 90 years. It wasn't going to go on forever. So they had to kill it. And basically they said, okay, well, we'll spend enough money. We've got, Alan doing, these, interviewing people, but, he was obviously pulling a salary from it. And basically, they had to get to a stage where they had to make a decision as to whether they wanted to go on. And if they didn't want to spend the money because they weren't getting anywhere, which I suppose to a certain degree they felt that was happening. And it was basically a ploy. So Project Blue Book was, a lot of people believe that Project Blue Book was a ploy to just not obfuscate the public, but not muddy the waters in terms of what this phenomenon is, but just to placate the public and make sure that, look, we're studying this, so don't get too worried about it. We're not going to be invaded by extraterrestrials.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just to placate the public to say that, okay, we're looking into it,
Right.
and don't get too worried about it, because there was a lot of paranoia in those days. People, I mean, you just have to look back at the black and white movies in those days, with invasion from Mars or some, what is it, Forbidden Planet, Independence Day, all these movies where there's clashes between extraterrestrials and humans. So people were paranoid about invasion from extraterrestrials because they've got impunity. They can do what they like.
Yeah. Not to mention that who was the War of the Worlds?
War of the Worlds. Yeah, that's that was Orson Welles.
Orson Welles, and he did a sort of, not an audio book, but he did, like a fictional. Well, was it him reading War of the Worlds over the radio?
Oh, he was reading War of the Worlds. Yeah. So
yeah.
it would have been. It wasn't Jules Verne. No. Sorry.
Anyway,
I'm showing my ignorance now.
No. But he sort of screened it over the radio, and everyone, like, I guess with no context, people just tuned into the radio. This thing was playing, but my understanding,
that was in 1938.
Yeah, and my understanding as well is that he was reading it. I'm sure if you listen from the start, perhaps there would have been a bit of context, but most people just tune in and out of the radio. And he was reading it as if it was an announcement.
Yeah, exactly.
And so people actually literally thought back then, there's obviously no internet, barely any television, so everyone's just tuning into the radio, and everyone freaks out, thinking quite literally we are being invaded by aliens. So yeah. So back to the I want to ask one quick question on Project Blue Book, and then, if you don't mind, Roger, not that things have to be chronological, but I would like to revisit your early days pre-MUFON, and then maybe towards the second half of our conversation, I'd love to pick your brain more about sort of UFO history, and also your thoughts on what's going on in current day UFO world. The question on Project Blue Book, do you think that because they sort of came out and not only did they say, oh, we didn't find anything, there's nothing to worry about, but they actually sort of ridiculed it and said, look, as Hynek said, it's just swamp gas. And then I always wondered, when I'm a teenager, pre-social media, on YouTube, I'm seeing comments in the YouTube section talking about swamp gas, and I didn't even know what swamp gas was, and I kept seeing it come up, and then I looked it up, and I thought, how common is that? That would be more bizarre a phenomenon if it was always swamp gas. So anyway, so they kind of ridiculed it, don't you agree? And
they did.
Would it not have been... It
was deliberate, yeah.
Yeah, but do you think that they were afraid that if they just sort of very casually said, look, for the most part, we can't really, we don't know what it is, but there have been unidentified things in the sky, and we will continue investigating on the side, but for the most part, we're going to close down this project because we haven't found anything substantial and there's nothing to worry about? That
would have been the reasonable thing to do, but they didn't. So it was publicly ridiculed.
Do you think because they feared looking incompetent and that they had to give a definitive answer?
No, I don't think it was. I think it was a deliberate attempt to ridicule the topic because basically of fear that they didn't know what was going on either.
They knew enough. They knew enough to know.
They knew enough to know.
Something quite serious.
There was something there,
but they had no explanation. And that's interesting because we can sort of move through to modern day with ORSAP and AARO and now ATIP. That theme actually sort of continues through.
It continues, which is disappointing. I mean, particularly with AARO and Sean Kirkpatrick, a lot of the UFO researchers were really annoyed by his conclusions and how smug he was when he mentioned it. And, you know, the fact that he was trying to emulate J. Allen Hynek, which is, you know, ridiculous because he's like, I mean, Alan Hynek was you know, like he was a highly intelligent guy who really had morals, whereas I can't really say that Sean Kirkpatrick has those morals that J. Allen Hynek. I'm going to be harsh about it because I can tell you what, we were really pissed off with him.
Yeah,
we were really pissed off with him.
Say it as it is, and for those at home listening who don't know who we're referring to, so Sean, is it Kirkpatrick?
Kirkpatrick.
Sean Kirkpatrick was the head of, I always get confused, was it AARO or was ATIP?
AARO.
AARO's the most recent one, and that is the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office.
Yeah.
Current,
and they've got another guy. They've got another guy that's taken over. I think his last name's Phillips, but I can't remember his first name. So that's the latest one. ATIP was really part of ORSAP.
Yes, it was an extension sort of ORSAP. I'd love to get to all that, but just quickly so we don't leave people who are new to this topic hanging. Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah, it's quite complicated.
AARO is basically the current formal sort of little group out of the Pentagon who formally investigate unidentified phenomena, anomalous phenomena. And this is all happening at a time when we have highly credible whistleblowers coming forward, and we have social media, and we have Netflix and documentaries and YouTube and Twitter, and podcasts. So this is all sort of at a time where most people now sort of tend to believe there's probably something out there because there's so many people talking about it that are credible. And so for Sean Kirkpatrick to come forward, and this was just in 2023, I think this was recently that he came out with this sort of report.
Yeah.
And he just mocked.
So it's a historical report. So they were supposed to do a historical report, but they came out with there were two reports that were supposed to have been issued out, and the first report was very much like there's nothing to see here, move along. We've investigated everything. There was a big problem at one stage between David Grusch and Sean Kirkpatrick, which blew out of all proportion because Sean Kirkpatrick was saying, I gave David Grusch so many opportunities to see me and tell me what, he had discovered, what was on his mind, etc., and what evidence he had. And then David Grusch was saying basically that I don't want to put words in his mouth, but to the effect that I gave him the evidence and I was just stonewalled, So there's a lot of animosity between the two, and it blew out of all proportions at one stage. And we had people supporting, some of the researchers actually supported Sean Kirkpatrick, which I was very annoyed about, and a lot of other researchers were really annoyed about. But because they did FOIA requests on David Grusch and all this sort of stuff, and it just got into a real mess. But so
I have so many questions on that. It's so fascinating, but I'm just imagining myself as a listener who's completely new to this. Can we put a pin in that? Because I think it's so fascinating, all of that, and I think you have a really interesting insight given your role as director of MUFON Australia and New Zealand, and being interested in this topic for so long. So a lot of the loudest voices in the space are people sort of my age who are or a little bit older who only got into this recently, which is fine. They've done all the research and they've but I'm really interested to get your perspective, given that there's some number of decades here. I shouldn't say it, makes you sound old, Roger. You're not. You look great. But
Thank you.
but not. You don't look great like Stephen Greer looks great. You know, he's so buff, but he's starting to age, and I want it.
He's starting to age, yeah.
Just on that, let's put a pin in that as well. Dr. Stephen Greer, I'd love to get your thoughts. But anyway, I'm gonna just pause this. Can we go back to your first sighting? Because on the Cosmic Banter podcast, there are no rules per se as to who we interview and the types of episodes, but a general theme is speaking to experiencers of any kind, who have in some way or another had an encounter with the phenomenon, the supernatural. So it would be remiss of me to just sort of let that encounter of yours slide, and I just want to sort of dive a bit deeper into that. Can you remind us of the age you were when this happened?
So I'm thinking I was around about 14 or 15.
Okay, so you're old enough to sort of grasp that this is not terrestrial.
I being a neuroscientist, I wasn't I was fairly young, but I was fairly like an intelligent teenager. So I could immediately when I saw this object, your brain is like a computer. You're triaging all this information in your brain, basically, and you're going through all the possibilities that it could be. And your brain is like a computer, and basically it's nearby, it's close. It's not as if I saw a distant object, in the sky that's miles away. This was close up. This actually landed. This actually did maneuvers which were unusual. This thing actually caused a change in the lighting around me. So what object does that? I've been told that. I know some people. I did an ABC interview recently. I don't know, it was at least last year, where somebody commented in a YouTube video that said that I think Roger saw ball lightning. There were no clouds in the sky. No clouds in the sky. So it was pretty easy for me to determine that this was an unknown, within seconds. Yeah. Within seconds. There's no way. And I think really because basically even thinking back that far, you do tend to sort of maybe add things, subtract things, etc., because it's a while ago, and it's just like trying to figure out. You watch this movie, say 10 years ago or 20, depending on how old you are, 20 years ago, and you're thinking, well, how does this movie go? Right, I'm thinking of the plot, etc., and you sort of you may not get the plot exactly right, but when you see that movie again, you think, oh yeah, that's right, this is what happened in that movie. So it's a bit like that for me, whereas I can't replay that movie. Yeah. Of my sighting. I wish I could, but I can't. But I know that, there might have been some things that I'm getting wrong. Maybe there's some things that I'm missing, etc. But I know for a fact that this thing really got my emotions going. And it happened can you imagine something happening for, I think it lasted for 2 minutes max. Wow. 2 minutes max. And it affects your entire life.
Yeah.
And just completely turns your paradigm of, what actually is this universe,
Yeah.
We're not alone. Hello, basically that's how that's how big an effect it had on me. So I'm even if I can't replay that movie, I can actually say that, okay, even looking back, I know how I reacted. I know how I got emotionally upset about it, and I got frightened by it, etc. I mean, you can imagine something that's, who knows what could have happened if I just stayed there. It could have, I don't know. I don't remember being abducted, But I know that I had.
Why do you say that you don't think you were abducted?
I don't remember. I don't remember being abducted or anything like that.
I know what you mean, and I know why you're saying that. To people listening who are unfamiliar with this topic, they might have thought just then, well, you either were abducted or you weren't abducted. Why would you even bring that up? So can you give people a bit of context as to why you would say, I don't believe I don't remember being abducted? Why did you even bring that up?
Because there's what we call abductees have what's called missing time. And the classic case, the really big case, there's two really big cases. The Betty and Barney Hill incident in 1961. So February 20th, 1961, I think, or 19th, February 19th. This couple, a black and a white couple. So he was black, she was white, were driving. They encountered a UFO. They stopped the car. He got his binoculars out, looked at the UFO. The UFO came closer to the car. He got really worried, ran back into the car, and they started driving. Then they heard this beeping sound. Then they got home. And so there was a period of 2 hours where it was missing time. So they didn't know what happened. They said they saw a UFO, right? That's what they remembered when they got home. But later on, Betty had started having all of these dreams about her in the actual incident where they saw the UFO, that she was being dragged out of the car, and he was, and taken on board a spacecraft. And they were then hypnotized by Dr. Simon, who was a Russian psychiatrist at that stage, because they were getting, they were stressed and everything. And a couple of years later, they said, we've got to get this sorted out. So they went to see this psychiatrist, Dr. Benjamin Simon, who actually regressed them hypnotically and found out that they were telling the same story independently. So you get skeptics that are saying that they could have had some banter going on on the bed, in bed, that they could have exchanged information, but he was saying that basically that didn't occur. So, wow. and basically there was physical evidence on the car. So there were polished areas on the car where if you put Betty rang her sister and she said, well, what do I do about, how do I investigate this? And she said, go and call a physicist. So she called a physicist and he said, get a compass out and put it near that shiny spot in your car. So the compass went, haywire when she put it near that shiny spot in the car. She also had a tear in a dress and some powdery pink substance on it, which they had analysed. And I can't remember what conclusions they came about.
Wasn't drugs. Wasn't drugs. No, not in those. Well, not in 60, I suppose they had drugs, but she wasn't on drugs. But the thing is, there was some physical evidence. There was something where they remembered independently under hypnotic regression. And people say, oh, hypnotic regression, it's a lot of bullshit. But then again, if you don't ask leading questions, you can actually improve the memory of someone, without, independently they can come up with something. So basically that's what I'm saying, to cut a long story short, is that people, so they were the first. Yeah. They were the first couple that actually mentioned missing time. Yes. Trailblazers, really.
So they were trailblazers because basically prior to that, there were charlatans that were coming out and saying, I went on, there was a spacecraft that landed. I went on board and we went to Venus. We went to Venus, which is a load of hogwash because, the surface temperature of Venus.
Yeah.
So we know it's bullshit.
It doesn't help our interest in the subject, does it, Roger?
But they were the people in those days, in the 50s, where they were saying, oh, yes, I've had contact with aliens and this is what's happened to me and I went on a spacecraft and blah, blah, blah. This is the first time that a couple who didn't know what they were looking at, who have blank slates as far as, ufology is concerned, UFOs are concerned. Betty's sister said she saw a UFO, but Betty knew nothing about UFOs. Neither did Barney. Barney actually he actually pushed against the topic. In other words, he tried to say, "Oh no, it wasn't a UFO. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't aliens, etc., etc." And then finally, he relented under a lot of duress to say, "Yeah, it was." Now I believe, he had an internal struggle where he was trying to mitigate his internal conflict to a certain degree. By saying, I've got to deal with this. And basically, I'm going to have to come to the conclusion that we did go through this. But he was putting up so many barriers to actually say that, we didn't go through this, So it's a really unusual case where, how did they come up with missing time? How did they come up, if this is a bullshit story, how did they come up with all these things, and where did the physical evidence come out of, out of thin air,
Yeah, and the Betty and Barney Hill story is pretty incredible on a few different levels. Don't you agree? Because you mentioned before that he was black, she was white. That is relevant because you're talking. I'm just double checking the exact date. It was the 50s. September 19th.
No, 1961. So September 19th.
That was me saying 50s. 1961. Yep.
61,
yep.
Yeah.
Now, this is just, the civil rights movement sort of from 54 loosely to 68.
Yeah.
It's still, and okay, New Hampshire, perhaps they're a bit more liberal, but this is still, I guess, a mixed race couple is still unusual at the time. Let alone coming forward about seeing a UFO. You'd be, you're ridiculed in private if you say you'd seen a UFO. You come public. Not only that, but you're willing to then have your story continue to be covered.
Can I just stop you for 1 second? They didn't go public. So basically what happened is their story was leaked by the Denver newspaper journalist. So he interviewed them and they didn't want to actually go public. Really? But it accidentally went public, yeah.
I didn't know that. But they nevertheless went along, embraced it.
Yeah, later on when the cat was out of the bag, then they had to, go on with that. And the actual tapes during their regressions can be found online as well, and they're frightening. The terror is palpable, and you can hear it in Barney's voice and her and Betty's voice. It's unbelievable what they went through.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that correction. That I didn't realize that part of the story. And I would encourage anyone who's interested. If you're interested in this topic, you'll very, very quickly come across the case of Betty and Barney Hill, but watch those hypnotic regression tapes. As Roger suggests, they're terrifying. Well, you can clearly tell the terror. Now, the point I raised that is they were obviously very brave. And this is sort of a theme on my podcast that my guess goal is to have a comfortable, non-judgmental platform for people to share their encounters, big, small, negative, positive, neutral, everything in between. They may have been very open about it to friends and family, or they may be telling it for the first time, or they've only told one other person. So I think experiencers and abductees have a lot to thank Betty and Barney Hill for, because I can't imagine firstly having such a world-changing, traumatic, let's use that word, experience, and then to have the story leaked but embrace, it publicly and just be so brave about it. So obviously since then, Roger, that's a common theme, is missing time, and that's why you said I can't tell for sure. I don't believe, I don't remember any sort of abduction. So that's why I wanted to pick that apart. Okay, and listeners of my show will recall. Actually, by the time that this interview with you, Roger, is aired, I will have uploaded my interview with two brothers in Christchurch. That involved a case of missing time. And sorry, I was wanting to publish it before our interview, so because I think it's such a fascinating.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating story. I'll tell you briefly in a moment. But I have another guest, Brock. He's I've done a couple of interviews with him. There's 3 or 4 parts. A 4th part coming, and I think we'll have to wrap it up after that. Sorry, Brock. But Brock has an alien abduction story that starts with missing time, and he's Australian, is in Melbourne. Starts with missing time, and the missing time story in and of itself is crazy. It's this impossible, strange story where he's at a party and he goes outside for a smoke or drink or whatever it was, looks up, and he actually has a sort of UFO sighting, sees this sort of orb in the sky, and then that's kind of the last thing he remembers. And then he wakes up. He wakes up just at the party at the house, down to his underwear, under the sort of in the kitchen, and it was like 4 or 5 a.m. His beers were still in the fridge. He can't remember anything. He goes and sort of wakes up his mates and says, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, are you still here? Mate, we lost you, and you must have crashed out." And then he has hypnotic regression, and speaking to a few people, getting feedback on that episode. That was the thing that people, found a little difficult to not saying, suggesting he's lying, but the fact that the abduction part of the story was only realized under hypnosis. So I would like you to talk to that briefly, Roger, because you slipped in very sneakily. I don't know if anyone else caught it. You said, as a neuroscientist, when I think back to when I was 14, so you have a doctorate in neuroscience. Can we just put that out there firstly? And so you have a very, I think, unique insight into the psychology of these experiences, these two very interesting subjects colliding.
So basically my neuroscience degree was a pathology degree. So when I say neuroscientist, everyone thinks of neuropsychology, neurophysiology. I didn't major in that. Not major in that, but I mean, my thesis was basically on motor neuron disease. So we were looking at, pathology.
I take it all back, Roger. I don't think
but just going back to my experience, if I may, just for a second.
Yes.
And you're talking about missing time. What I did experience as a child, which was unusual and rare, were panic attacks. So I had panic attacks when I was a kid. I remember back when I was 5, and they persisted. And most of the panic attacks used to occur during waking up from sleep, and sometimes it happened during the day, where for no reason I just have massive panic attack, which I still to this day I don't know what was going on. Can't explain it, and it's sort of like a dissociation with reality, and not to say that I'm mad, and there's a psychopathy involved in me, because I don't think I have anything like that. I mean, I had a depressive episode when I was in my, I think 20s and whatever, and basically, but that was unusual, and I still thought, and I don't want to necessarily link it to, an abduction scenario, but I still just wondering, why did I have those panic attacks? And what, very unusual, because I remember one day, I would have been about maybe 9 or 10, and I'd remember just for no reason, like I was just falling asleep, and then all of a sudden waking up and find out it's dark, what the hell happened to the day, It's just crazy.
Really? So
Yeah.
your last memory would be that it was daytime.
Daytime, yeah, absolutely. And then I'd have a full-blown panic attack thinking, what just happened? Yeah.
Did you wake up and it was nighttime? Are you in bed at this point? What is happening?
No, so I do remember it was in the house, in the farmhouse. And so, yeah, I've only got vague memories of it, but I do remember the panic attacks are like solidly in my memory. Like I can never forget anything like that. It was extremely debilitating, extremely debilitating. And the odd thing about them is that most of them would occur during the night and with no explanation. I've looked up, panic attacks in kids, and they're pretty rare. They happen in adults. And I hate the word panic attack because it may not necessarily be what I went through. It wasn't a panic attack in the sense that, heavy breathing, oh, I think I'm going to die. Nothing like that. It was still like a dissociation in the mind thinking, oh, it's difficult for me to explain it, but like a dissociation with like, I know here I am right now, it's reality, etc., etc. But when I had these panic attacks, thinking, am I really here? It's just a dissociation with reality, bringing on some panic, which I couldn't explain. So anyway, that's what happened. So whether that's related to anything with abduction scenario or anything, I just really don't know. And I don't want to necessarily, as I said before, I don't want to necessarily, connect them, because then that's not scientific. Like you can't connect something without any physical evidence to say that, oh yes, the two are connected, but they may not be.
Well, I love that. I'm witnessing this sort of conflict of your two worlds of science and your interest in UFOs, your field work, but also knowing yourself. You saw with your own eyes, and it terrified you, and a non-terrestrial craft, or even beyond that, orb. And so I can see the mental gymnastics you're going through there of this is not scientific to, correlation does not equal causation. However, I've had an experience with a non-terrestrial craft, a UFO, and I've got this fascinating, you know all about the subject, and you've spoken to so many witnesses and abductees that you know that this is often the pattern.
Yeah.
That's
I
curious.
mean, I think some people say, well, why did you get frightened? But I mean, really, if you put yourself in that situation, whereas you're young, you're vulnerable, you're on your own, it's getting dark, and you could have possibly facing something from another part of the universe. It would frighten the hell out of anyone. Really, I mean, I've spoken to people, and like some people in ufology, like fairly well-known people who I won't mention, but they're saying, "Oh yeah, I'd love to go on a UFO. If they landed, I'd just go into that craft." Boy, I don't think you would. I don't think you would. I don't think anyone on this earth, on this planet, would actually do that, because you don't really know what you would do unless you were confronted with that in that situation. And I'm not saying that I'm a chicken or like I'm gutless and whatever. It's just that when you're confronted in that situation by something that or like you're pretty sure that this is nothing that's been created on this earth, like how do you pass that in your brain, and in terms of all the multiple things that could possibly happen to you, like, I mean, are they an adversary? Are they friendly? Like, I mean, what can they do to me if they can get here? They, like nothing, there's nothing we can do, in terms of what they could do to us,
Yeah. I see, I think there's a lot of parallels between, I don't just cover UFOs. I'm not just interested in the UFO topic, but the supernatural that encompasses paranormal stuff, that encompasses near-death experience. And it's a bit of a I don't know, a bit of a dodgy one, because not many people would want to admit they believe in this, but cryptid creatures. We don't have to get into that, but the reason I bring them up, the dog man, a Sasquatch being a classic one, is that the type of fear people describe is, it's one thing to come across a bear or a wolf in the woods, or a lion in the Serengeti or something, and oh my God, I know what this is. There's a biological instinct here, like it's built into us for millennia, and we're not supposed to be that close to something that can quite clearly kill us. But to see something that shouldn't exist, you can't comprehend it, and yet there it is. Can you, with your science background, as best you can, what do you think that does? It's kind of like, without giving the specifics, I'll walk around it because people will know what I'm talking about. Let's say a younger person without a fully developed brain sees some horrifically graphic content on the internet that their brain cannot comprehend. It's sort of something like that. What does that do to the human brain?
It's a difficult question to answer.
Is it PTSD?
Do you mean, are you talking about the graphic violence? What does that do, or is it the UFO thing?
Sorry, to be clear, that's the only example I can think of. But what goes on, let's say...
It's a totally different experience. So I'm going back to your scenario of, being in a situation on the Serengeti where, you can see a lion in the distance and it's coming towards you. Yeah, there's a lot of, fear. What do? Flight or fight response. It's part of the amygdala, part of the brain where, you sort of think, what am I going to do? It's a life and death situation. It's a different situation when you're seeing a UFO, and when you up towards, it's abject terror. That's the only way I can describe it. It's sort of like, it's different. It's different to you seeing a lion or tiger a lion on the Serengeti, and you're going to die, but you've got to do something, right? It's sort of like a different situation. I feel that it's something that is difficult to describe, because it's something from a different area of the universe, and it's something like I don't know. I mean, sometimes I wish I'd be killed by a lion than being taken on a spacecraft to some other planet.
Yeah,
I'd rather that happen, and it's just that. I don't know. It's just, that's the difference, because you're not here on Earth. This is where we evolved, and
it's so
fair
foreign.
enough.
Yeah,
By line, let them kill me and eat me. I've evolved here. So whatever happens here, my fate's here. But it's different when it's something from a different planet. It's just a completely different feeling, and I don't know whether I sound mad when I'm saying that.
You don't. I posed the question. Different. You don't sound mad. No, that makes total sense. I suppose, and it's a hard one to even frame as a question. I suppose that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that you take a child in some remote part of the world that doesn't have tigers or lions or even wolves. I don't know. New Zealand's a great example. We don't have no predators, no native animals, native mammals, apart from a few species of bat. And of course, as you know, being an Australian, we've got plenty of sheep. But look, we don't have wolves. So, hypothetically, if there was someone that grew up in the wops out here and they were never taught that, in Africa, there are these things called lions. In North America and Europe and Russia, Siberia, there are bears and wolves. Yeah. And they were showing photos. And yet, if they ran across one somehow in the bush, they would still have a biological sort of response that I know what this is. Like this is human beings have historically encountered these animals, so it must be so much more of a shock to encounter something that is not supposed to even exist, period. And yet there it is. Roger, can we jump now to your time in MUFON and how I sort of first came across you? Was actually a couple of years back when I was in Australia, I was in Melbourne, and I came across this documentary on Channel 7, which is Close Encounters Down Under. And it's a mini-series. There's sort of 6 parts, isn't there? Six episodes?
6 parts, 6 episodes,
And it is absolute. I'm not just saying this because I'm interviewing you. In fact, it's why I've got you on, because I was so impressed. It is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
And you appear, I mean, you don't narrate it. It's a Channel 7 production, but you appear and are interviewed in each episode.
And
as I understand it, you also were responsible for encouraging the witnesses who are interviewed on the show to come on. Now, there's 6 episodes. It covers all the states in Australia, and I think there might have even been one Papua New Guinea episode or something. And then I think it's episode 5. There's 2 cases here in New Zealand. But any one of those 6 episodes is amazing because it's not just people seeing lights in the sky. These are people who have had, as the name suggests, actual encounters. Can you speak to maybe one or 2 of the cases in that show? Some compelling ones, and ones that have such a sort of compelling, fascinating element that even skeptics would struggle to explain it.
Yeah. So basically, there was one case where, and you probably know because I haven't been to New Zealand. I've been trying to get to New Zealand ever since I was 17. I've been everywhere around the world, but I think you're familiar with the place where this happened, where there was a gentleman who couldn't sleep one night. He was decided to get out of bed, get out of the house. For some strange reason, he wanted to go to the beach, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, with a glass of wine, red wine, and he saw across the I'm not sure whether it's a lake or it's not a lake. Sorry, it's part of the ocean anyway. In the distance, he saw
off the coast of Kapiti Island. New Zealanders will be familiar. Kapiti,
there's an island.
Coast.
Yeah, sorry about the fact that I hadn't revised this.
No, not at all.
And so basically, he'd seen an object hovering over the ocean, and he didn't know what it was, but he thought it was highly unusual because it sent down a beam and started doing a raster pattern on the ocean. And he thought, I wonder what that is. That's really strange. And all of a sudden, the object is on the beach, and it's this what can only be described as an extraterrestrial craft. And because I haven't gone through this case in a while, my detail on it is a bit sketchy. But an entity came out of the craft, confronted the guy, and said, "I'm really concerned about microplastics in the oceans."
Yes.
And he went to touch the entity and had this feeling of dread going right through him. So it was saying, "Do not touch me." It went back into the craft and took off. So he had a very close encounter with, not just a UFO, but an entity came out on the beach. And unfortunately, there was no trace evidence because the tide came in and took all the evidence of the sand of the craft on it and footprints, etc., etc. But the person involved is highly credible. I've interviewed him. I've spoken to him like for hours, and basically, there's absolutely no reason he didn't want any sort of publicity for it. And he is a professional person who is intelligent and very, very knowledgeable in terms of, not knowledgeable, but he has very coherent, very like he doesn't seem to be suffering from anything in terms psychologically or anything. A very interesting encounter.
Yeah, and if you'll allow me, I'll just add a couple of things because I was so fascinated by that case, and it's funny because it was your interviewee that you brought onto the show, but that was my favorite. I remember him saying that, yes, as you say, sees this craft, classic sort of saucer, I guess, but it was nighttime. And he went out to the beach because he couldn't sleep, and it landed. And a being came out as, in his words, he would say, what I now understand to be what people call a grey.
Yep.
When people think of aliens, the classic, grey alien with a bald head, almond-shaped black eyes, and usually quite short. And I think the way it was really compelling, the way he said, he was kind of like, this sounds crazy, but it's what I now, since having this experience and doing research, understand to be a grey. And I got the impression that he would otherwise be, feel, I don't know, he wouldn't be confident saying, oh yeah, it was a grey alien from this star system and da 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 da. Like he was quite reserved, and it had this element of telepathy, and he said he saw the Amazon rainforest.
That's right. Yeah, he had a lot of images projected in his mind that the entity was trying to pass a message. I sort of like related to that to a certain degree because I know when I was a kid. And I told you about the panic attacks, but I was also very paranoid about pollution on the earth and overpopulation. Now, that wasn't, and I found it unusual. Like looking back, I still found it unusual that why was I as a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old getting really depressed about that? So sorry, going back to this guy. So it was really interesting that this UFO was out there, sending, like, it was actually scanning probably for microplastics in the ocean. And, are they, why are they concerned, for starters? And if they are concerned, are they concerned about us, or are they concerned about themselves? Do they live in the oceans, and how would the microplastics affect them? I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other theory as well, as the USOs, the underwater.
The USOs,
submerged, whatever it is. Yeah, unidentified submerged objects. But
objects,
there are a lot of, there's
a lot of research going on in that field as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Richard Dolan.
He's written a book on it. I don't.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet. I don't know if you have.
No, I haven't.
But there's a lot of people that believe that there are bases, and all this sort of conversation is sort of, it's acceptable now to speculate on. You have a bunch of people saying in Congress, in congressional hearings, that, well, it came from the ocean, and look, there's a lot of activity off the coast of here, and we don't know for sure, but it would make sense that there could be, the fact that this exists is crazy enough as it is, but
Yeah.
we would think where they may come from may not always be from another planet, another star system. They could be already here. There's a lot of
Already
evidence
here,
to
yeah.
suggest that. And
Well,
then we've got,
there was another incident where I suppose I could mention his name, David Barnett, I think is his name. He was one of the naval officers on a sub, which encountered a USO in New Zealand. I think in the 80s or early 90s, and that was brought up by at a meeting. I don't know whether it was a soul meeting or I think it was a soul meeting, where he was in a sub, and this USO was traveling at phenomenal speed. And he actually first contacted me and spoke to me about it because he was interested in joining MUFON because he lived in New Zealand, and he recalled this incident with this USO in the submarine. And he was later interviewed and by a physicist who is also a researcher in ufology. His name doesn't come to my memory at the moment. I know who it is, but I just can't pluck the name out of my head. But he actually did some physics on the actual, like USO and how much power it had to be generating to travel at the velocity it was underwater. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm just sorry, I'm not being rude. I'm just, as you're saying that, trying to flip
Yeah,
through
you're searching for it. Yeah.
I showed you this before we chatted. I had this problem last time with the bloody green screen. You won't be able to see it, but look, it's not working. Oh, if I put it in front of
Oh, yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah, New Zealand through the years. And the author, Moira McGee,
yeah.
She's a MUFON field investigator. She's in Australia.
No. She was in MUFON. She was in MUFON. I've met Moira on a couple of occasions. She's basically she's got a few books out. She's more so interested in abductions through families, like people, like looking at people and looking at the family tree and encounters with extraterrestrials. She's done books on that.
Right.
And she's, like, I haven't actually seen that publication that she's done, but she's fairly prolific when it comes to,
I just got this out of the local library. It was only published.
Does she mention that incident in there?
Well, it goes through in chronological order, all of these cases in New Zealand, and I might be imagining it, but I had a feeling that I'd come across that. Did you say late 70s?
No, it would have been, I think it was either in the 80s or 90s when this incident occurred.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I might actually quickly look it up.
Yeah, because I'm sure in that case, it sounds like a pretty prominent case. I'm sure it would have been included. I can cut these gaps out.
Yeah, I think it was at the Soul Foundation where Tim Gallaudet and a couple of other researchers were talking about it. Sorry, I'm not really prepared to give you all the details about this because we're picking and like going through all the different possible things that we could talk about, and there's a lot of things that we can talk about.
Well, that's really interesting. And I'll tell you off air. I won't bore everyone because hopefully they would have seen my episode 16, which is the UFOs over Roydvale School. I'll tell you separately offline about that, but this is a case where, well, actually, I do want to just very quickly touch on that because I wonder if if this sort of rings any bells to you, if this is a theme, because this is a case that's, in my opinion, very significant. It's kind of a mass UFO sighting over a school during daytime, during lunchtime, in 1973 in Christchurch, in the suburb of Burnside, at Roydvale Primary School. Nothing. There is absolutely nothing on the internet.
Written on it,
Nothing. There was no historical, nothing in the archives, nothing done on the radio or newspapers at the time. We know of at least 6 people who confirmed the sighting, but none of the other kids saw it. But just very quickly, the crux of it, the really fascinating part of the story, where I interviewed 2 brothers who've spoken about it, all these decades later, they claimed that it was a sunny day, and then all of a sudden at lunchtime, kids are playing outside, everything goes quiet. I know that that's common with UFO sightings.
Yes.
So all the kids yelling and playing, the cars, the birds, the plane, they were next to Christchurch International Airport.
Right.
Complete silence.
Silent. Yep.
Completely silent. The first brother I speak to, he happens to be looking up in this direction. He sees 3 silver discs, completely silent, moving over, probably about 30 seconds. He got a good look at them, and he was just watching them pass over. And when this happened, it was a sunny day, it became overcast all of a sudden. The weather changed. It became overcast and dark.
Yep.
When they passed, all of the noise started again. Kids kept playing, the planes, the cars, the birds, everything. We speak to the brother. I'm so glad I got to speak to his brother, because he corroborates the exact same story, except he happened to be looking both up at the craft and down at the kids on the school field at the same time. And you know what, Roger? He said that everyone was completely frozen.
Frozen, yeah. That's what I thought you were going to say, yeah.
And he said that there was about half of them perhaps were looking up at the craft as if they'd seen it, but they were frozen. Yeah. But he was looking around, and there was a bunch that hadn't seen it, and there was a guy mid-cricket game that is just going to bat the ball, and he distinctly remembers that he was frozen. And afterwards, everything like that just carries on as normal, and no one in the schoolyard talked about it. So does that come up before? And do you have any theories as to what that is? Some sort of manipulation of time?
There's 2 factors here. You're talking about schoolyard sightings. So basically, there's multiple schoolyard sightings. One of the biggest ones in the world was the Westall sighting in Victoria. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people know about that one. I've actually been to the site. I'm from Sydney, but I went to a friend's place, and he took me out to Westall High School. So
I visited it too when I was in Melbourne. Yeah, I visited the spot where Ross Coulthard interviewed them all.
Yeah. I went to the Grange as well, and went to the site where the thing landed. The thing is that you have these sightings. You've got aerial school in, I can't remember. It's some African country.
Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe, yep. Aerial Zimbabwe. You've got a Wales. There was a school sighting in the 70s. There were sightings in a high school in the States. I can't remember which state it was in. So you got all these sightings that are occurring with school children, and you sort of wonder why are these sightings occurring with school children. There's also that the second part of what you all brought up is the fact that not so much the freezing part, but the silence. And I interviewed a lady who was an extremely interesting lady, very intelligent lady who's American, but now living in New Zealand. So she brought up an encounter that she had in New Zealand, but she went back to a story initially, when she first was living in the States, she was living in, I think, Idaho at the time, and basically opposite this lake called Beaver Lake. And she was in her house. Her kids were with her, and she couldn't sleep, got up, saw this gigantic UFO over the lake. And she told me that one really unusual thing is that normally you can hear the babbling brook where she is and the crickets and other nightlife, but everything was quiet, even the babbling brook. And so everything went silent when this UFO was hovering over the lake. So yeah, I can, there's those two factors. I've never really heard of anything where people were frozen. That's the first time I've heard of, for that one time when they went over, everything had frozen. And then when they left, everything went back to normal. But certainly the sound, the lack of sound, I've come across that before. Witnesses have told me where that's occurred. And it's not just with me, but you'll find it in other stories by other researchers that have interviewed people that, all of a sudden, everything, you can't hear anything. It's just like underwater. Mm-hmm. There was a very famous sighting, the Berkshire UFO. There's an episode on Netflix. It's absolutely fascinating. They also, there was a family in the car where they said that everything completely went silent. It was just that they were underwater. It couldn't hear anything. And the grandmother ended up in the wrong area. She was the driver, and she can't drive. So they, allegedly abducted and put in the wrong positions in the car back when they went back in the car. They were going to this pharmacy or something.
Is it like the grandma was in the driver's seat or something, and she
was in the wrong position. She was in the wrong position. And a lot of the time, I've heard of stories where people get abducted and they get the wrong clothes on them. They get, if there are multiple abductions occurring in the one stage, they've got something on the back of the front, or it's a bit of clothing that's not theirs, or something else is going on. So, it's sort of like, you sort of wonder, well, if these creatures are so intelligent, why are they putting the wrong clothing on the wrong people? But I don't know what to think about it. But I definitely have, that's like, there's been books written about schoolyard abductions. I think one of them is, it's only a small book, but it's made by a UFO researcher, and his name doesn't come to mind at the moment. He's an American UFO researcher. He mentions me in it because I mentioned in a post that I made about UFOs in schoolyards, and I thought, is there some sort of theme to this? I mentioned it on my blog, and so he mentioned me in the book, and I'm not the topic of discussion or anything like that, but he's just carried on from what I said initially about schoolyard abductions and why are they occurring, and you sort of wonder whether these creatures maybe they want to impress something on like a developing brain, like in school with kids. And maybe they might be giving them warnings. And apparently that's what happened at Ariel High School in Zimbabwe. They were saying, you got to be careful with planet Earth. Basically you're polluting it, you're overpopulating it. There's things that could happen, with nuclear warheads, et cetera, et cetera. So they're warning kids, and it's a good thing to start. Kids go to school to learn how to behave, how to do mathematics, how to do all that. So they're impressionable. So basically they're targeting impressionable brains, it's the future for humanity, I guess. If you tell something to an adult, their brain's hardwired, and they'll just say, yeah, it's bullshit. Or they'll say, we don't care, or, apathetic, who knows. But, when you're a kid, your brain is a sponge, and your brain's developing. It's still making neural connections, and it's you're impressionable, and it actually forms, like once you hardwire everything, it changes your personality in a way that, it could be good or bad in some instances, depending upon how you're brought up and whatever. Perhaps that's what they're doing. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it seems, and there's so many avenues to this topic that we just cannot go down, because we could be here for years. But you've got the whole question of there are different, species, they have different intent, different levels of intelligence, different crafts, some extraterrestrial, perhaps some under the water. And then you've got the whole Jacques Vallée extra-dimensional hypothesis or whatever. So of the ones we know of, those classic cases of Rua Zimbabwe, like you mentioned, and even that man in New Zealand in the Kapiti coast, you seem that does seem to be a common theme, is this sort of telepathy, this telepathic message about needing to take better care of the environment, of the planet. So it seems, on face value, unless we're being quadruple psyoped, by the aliens, it seems to be a pretty... Well, that's what I mean. It seems face value to be pretty positive. I don't... Yeah, but then there's the whole sort of arguments of... but there are also, other malicious beings. But that's interesting. I thought the time part was interesting too, and certainly the first brother that I interviewed, he was like, I want to get this out there, because there must have been dozens of other kids that saw it. And then
how long? So 1973, did you say?
Yeah, they're not one.
Quite a while ago, so they'd all be in their 60s maybe.
They were, it was primary school. They were, so he's...
Or 50s.
He was 61 and his younger brother was 59, I think. But
okay.
they know personally, that they talk to, there's 6 of them in total, but there's only, apart from the brothers, there's only one other who they're still in touch with, but she lives in Australia now, but she confirmed it. She confirmed exactly that.
That information should come out, because it's quite interesting, because as you say, it's not in the UFO literature or anything.
No.
So it's something new. Yeah.
Well, selfishly, as of the time we're recording this, I haven't published it, so it's probably going to be a massive flop. But knowing me, I'm excited that I'm feel privileged to be given the platform to share lost history and such important story.
Exactly.
But the reason I bring it up is, the first brother, Glenn, he's talking about, it's frustrating. What was it? But why is there nothing on the internet? Why? And I hope that from this interview, more people come forward, and I'm kind of having my own thoughts and, speculation on why that may be, but I sort of kind of allude to it, but it's his story, keep it quiet. Speak to the brother. And I sort of said, because he was a bit more open to, the maybe supernatural side component. And I said, Daryl, it's not my story, and I'm completely speculating, but do you think the reason why there was nothing reported in the media, and that apart from the 4 others that you two spoke to at that age, at that time, that for the most part you weren't supposed to see it, and that plays into the whole everyone was frozen, and that's why even though it flew over all the suburbs and the international airport in the daytime, and if everyone was frozen, perhaps you had a little slip, or you were not frozen, but you weren't supposed to.
There's something called time slippage as well, which I've not read about, I've heard about. Some people do bring it in, like it's sort of like there's instances where like physicists find it very difficult to define time, and they think we live in block time, so it's not a progression from 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. It's not. We live in forward time or backward time. It's just a block time. But some people have said that they've experienced time slippage. So it could be something like that for a split second, where this extraterrestrial craft had gone through, and there's some sort of time slippage occurring because of the way that they move, their technology or whatever, whether they're moving using some sort of mechanism that bends space-time and causes slippage of time. I'm only just, speculating enormously here.
Yeah, as we all are. But when I do,
it's an interesting.
Yeah, when I publish it, I'll obviously show you. But by the time our interview goes out, it would have already been published. And I'll be sure to send this interview off to the brothers, because particularly Daryl's pretty interested in the topic. So I'm sure he already knows you. So he'd be interested to sort of at least hear your speculation on it. 2026, Steve here. At this stage in the conversation, Roger and I start discussing that New Zealand incident that I alluded to in the intro. So we're going to cut that out, and hopefully with a little bit more research and planning, I'm not comfortable just yet, that part of the conversation will be published soon as a second part of the interview. But we'll carry on. At this point, Roger discusses a very opportunistic moment where he almost meets infamous Harvard psychiatrist John Mack.
There was another professor who was a psychiatrist at Harvard who John Mack. Yeah, I almost had an opportunity to meet him in the 90s.
Wow.
Because of my experience. He came to Sydney, and I went to see a UFO researcher who I requested to do regression so I could go back through my experience, and he suggested that I see John Mack, and he'd come to Sydney. He'd come to Circular Quay in the 90s. I can't remember which year it was, but it would have been in the early 90s, and I actually drove up to the seminar and could not get myself out of the car. I was so, I don't know, I just couldn't.
Oh, couldn't do it.
Nervous? As a what?
What do you mean? As in nervous or?
Nervous, yeah, nervousness. Yeah.
About the therapies, the hypnotherapy, regressive hypnosis session itself, or about meeting John Mack? Just
about meeting John Mack and actually divulging the information. And I thought, am I doing the right thing? Have I imagined all this? It was all that stuff was going through my head. I'm certainly if it happened now, I'm a bit more confident now. I was very shy and introverted as a kid, and had depressive episodes, the panic attacks, etc. But now I've dealt with that, and so I just didn't get to see him. I should have. I'm kicking myself now. But he received a lot of blowback.
Oh,
yeah.
Do you want
there was
for the audience, again, I'm just conscious that, the UFO nerds know exactly who we're talking about every single
So he's a
case.
Harvard professor in psychiatry who actually went to Ariel High School in Zimbabwe, who interviewed the students there, and he was very interested in the phenomenon. And unfortunately, he was killed on the road by a drunken driver at a crossing. Later on, he lost his life tragically, but he received a lot. He was very interested in the phenomenon, and he interviewed a lot of people, and he believed that this was something real. And he believed that obviously a highly intelligent guy who saw threads of the phenomenon through abductees that he thought were coherent in terms of what they were saying and what they were experiencing. He could connect the dots, and he believed that there was something worthwhile looking at. But his lawyer, Danny Sheehan, who's a very well-known UFO investigator as well, highly respected in many different fields, who looked at the current Silkwood incident. Also, many different. He's a lawyer, so he looked at many different things which we know in history, major things which he looked at in the JFK assassination, the Watergate scandal, etc., etc. Yeah, Watergate scandal. And so he was a lawyer that defended him against the chair, the dean of the faculty, and he won that case, and they didn't tell him to leave. But you've got to be a fairly high-profile person. I didn't receive any blowback. I mean, people sort of some people didn't really know that I was into this as a neuroscientist, and I did have a clash with my supervisor at one stage, but it was unrelated. And eventually I actually changed jobs, but it was completely unrelated to what I was doing as a hobby. And personally, I wasn't one to actually spread information throughout the University of Sydney that I was interested in the field. Although I think now I could probably go over there and do a seminar on this topic, and basically it would be well received, because there's a lot of people, a lot of students are very, really interested in this. You find out that the higher the intelligence level, the more curious people are, and they want to know more about this topic. Certainly you get your crackpots that are saying that they've been abducted by a UFO. Some people have psychologies that, enable them to, I would not enable them, but, they hallucinate and they make up things. But I don't come across that often, to be honest. People do mistake things. I mean, there's obviously cases where, there's a mistaken identity. That someone will see Venus. There was a case in New Zealand where I got contacted by someone who said that they were seeing a UFO and it was coming there every night. And he mentioned it, and it even almost got to the media. And I worked out that, I said, look, take a photograph, tell me which location you're in, tell me which way you're facing. And I worked out without a shadow of a doubt that it was Venus. And it almost went to the media. The actual media contacted me and said, what's this case that's going, this case about this UFO in New Zealand? And the witness got really stroppy with me because, I said it was Venus. He says, it's not Venus, it's moving. And I said, but it's moving because you're driving, and it's it's in the same location. And I said, did you take a video? He would never take a video of it. I said, take a video, because I want to know whether it's actually moving or whether you're actually saying that it's moving when it's not, So, there's cases of mistaken identity. 90% of our cases, 95% of the cases, we can actually explain.
Yeah.
And
I think that's an important
But there's that 5%, and when you whittle it down, there's the 0.1% that's 1% that's extremely difficult to explain. There's that 5%, but if you can whittle that down a little bit further, there are cases that are completely unexplainable.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is that, really much of your work at MUFON is investigating, and, although it's known as the Mutual UFO Network, and all the stories we hear are these incredible 5%, 1% stories, you have to sift through a lot that are completely prosaic, and you're not trying to encourage the witness to change the story. Oh, that sounds a bit like Venus. Can you just change that? This story's not going to, you know what I mean? You're not getting paid. So you're very keen as well to make sure that we're ruling out, prosaic things.
Yeah, we don't want to call something an unknown or an extraterrestrial vehicle if we, it's bad. It's a bad look for us. And basically, if we say something's an unknown or like a possible UFO, and then the public find out, and then there's more work done, and they say actually it was Venus, we look bad. So we'll try our utmost to try and work out whether we can figure it out. And we use various tools like Flight Radar 24, which is available to everyone, Stellarium, a bit of software that'll tell you where any planet or any star will be, or whether there's a meteor shower, or whether there's, there's software out there that'll tell you where space junk is, and we're skilled, like we know what Starlink looks like. We know what space junk looks like. We know when space junk can be seen, what time period it can be seen, So we're, and we usually can work these things out. And as I said before, 90 to 95% of cases are mistaken identification of things.
Now,
which sounds like a lot, but
yes, it does sound like a lot. But
yeah,
all you're saying is that you're ruling out 90 to 95%, which is actually refreshing to hear, because it suggests that you're not jumping to conclusions, that you're researching, investigating very thoroughly enough to exclude 90 to 95%. I think that number works in your favor, works to your credibility, if anything. But the fact that 5% are completely unexplainable, and the fact that there are 1%, I presume the 1% as you're referring to are more the ones where it's not even a case of, hey, where was Venus positioned that night? Where was this star? Where was Starlink? But an actual abduction and interaction, a close encounter.
We've had cases, like we've had one case where a lady was traveling in a vehicle, like a camper van, where she encountered an incident where an unknown object, this was daytime, had pushed her vehicle to the other side of the road. Like she encountered this object. It was like a green tear-shaped object that hit her vehicle, pushed it to the side of the road while she was driving. We tested the dust on the vehicle and found an anomalous copper-cadmium alloy as a powder on a vehicle, which is extremely rare and unusual, through X-ray microanalysis, EDX. So we used highly sophisticated equipment from a laboratory in Melbourne to actually work this out. And so that would be the 1% of cases where there was an object that was seen in broad daylight. There was an incident where, again, in the car, this object had the force to actually move the vehicle to the other side of the road while she was driving. And she was extremely shocked and got depressed about the whole thing. And she's writing a book about it now. But and there was an article in the Women's Weekly about it. So yeah, there's quite a few cases, because even in that 1% or 5%, there's a lot of cases, because we go through hundreds and thousands of cases. We're up to about, from 2000 worldwide, we're up to about 150,000 possible cases of UFOs. So that 5% or 1% still works out to be, but that's just from 2000.
So from the year 2000, and just with MUFON,
there's about 100 and maybe, I haven't really looked at the database recently, but could be about 180, 190,000 cases.
Of unexplained, worldwide. Categorically unexplainable.
Oh, no. This is total. So of those, 5% would still amount to an enormous amount. So 190,000, 10% of that's what, 19,000, is it? And then 5% of that would be half of that. So there's still a lot of cases which we would, consider highly unusual. So even if you whittle it down to that amount, there's still a lot of cases that are highly unusual.
Well, Roger, this has been a absolutely fantastic conversation. It's coming up 2 a.m. my time, and I'm the one that wants to keep going. But I really appreciate. Yeah, look, I really appreciate your time, and
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. And I was stoked to be able to get you, because certainly in the UFO world, and certainly in our neck of the woods, you're top on my list. I literally have a list. You're on my list to interview, so that's great. To wrap up, Roger, I just have a final question. So 2017, the New York Times front page article, Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean break the story about ATIP with Lou Elizondo. And basically, the world gets to know for the first time that the Pentagon is formally researching UFOs. And then we have this slew of whistleblowers, and there's been huge progress since 2017. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Those videos were out way before 2017, but it goes back to the fact that the U.S. Navy and Air Force were looking at UFOs and had video evidence of them, and the Pentagon obviously was involved and taking it seriously. They call them unknowns, so they've looked at these videos and couldn't work out how they could actually classify what was actually going on here. It was groundbreaking, but then again, because I've been in the field for so long, it's not the first time it's happened. There were instances where like congressional hearings in 1960, in the 1960s. So we had a congressional hearing in 2020, I think it was, and that was after 50 years of not having congressional hearings on UFOs. So they took UFOs very seriously, many decades ago. You had the 1952 flap where you had objects going over the Capitol building, which they explained as temperature inversions, but there was a lot of hoo-ha going on then. In modern times, obviously because we weren't alive then. There were people that were, like elderly people that can remember that when that happened. But this is, this instance where you're talking about where Helene Cooper and Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal had worked with Chris Mellon to get these videos out, was something that was quite groundbreaking for this period of time, because and with the technology that we have now, we should be able to actually work out what these things are, because we've got forward-looking infrared cameras. We've got all this sophisticated information, and still they're turning out as unknowns. So yeah, it was big. It was big news. AARO has tried to avoid looking at them. They didn't bring them up during their report, and they refused to look at them. But then they said that the Go Fast was a balloon of some sort. So they're still trying to debunk them. So nothing's really changed, apart from the fact that our technology and our sensors are they're more advanced, and we can actually whittle down the fact, we can whittle down whether these cases are actually still unknown according to the technology that we have compared to the 1950s or 60s or whatever.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that this has happened before. There have been these momentous occasions. So yeah, appreciate that. And it just seems to me, in my short stint interest in this topic, that I was interested in this before 2017. I don't have much to go off before then, but tangibly speaking, perhaps not so much at the government level, because as you mentioned, AARO still trying to debunk things and all of this, and they're not very helpful at all. But since then you've had Lou Elizondo be very vocal about this. We've had David Grusch. We have Ross Coulthart now full-time doing this and getting millions of views on YouTube. And we have Gary Nolan and more recently Jake Barber, this whole thing about crash retrieval programs. And he's now set up his own private company to try and retrieve a craft, and there's this whole consciousness conversation. So, do you think, from your experience, from your understanding of the UFO history and also your own experience in this field, does it feel like, one, are we at some type of turning point compared to other times in history? And two, do you think that our best opportunity at disclosure, does it come from the government level, top down, or does it come from the people, whistleblowers, reporters? How's this going to play out?
Well, the two have to meet in the center. Like, basically, it's got to come from ground up as well as from the top, and never the twain shall meet. By apparently, basically, it's even difficult to say whether it came from the government as to whether the public would accept it, because of all the the political lying that's occurring. What we need is a spacecraft, and we need a body, and that does it. That's end of the story, basically. So we need the physical evidence, and it'll take an act of God to get that. I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, I will only be happy when that happens, because you can have as many photographs and videos and as many documents, and it's evidence, but we need the actual, we need the actual evidence in terms of physical evidence. In other words, we need not even a piece of a spacecraft. We need an actual spacecraft. We need an actual body.
Yeah.
So once that happens, it's game over. So disclosure really won't happen until that happens.
I find that really interesting coming from you, because you must clearly, from your own experience and your professional experience interviewing experiences, you must believe this phenomenon exists. So you don't need that closure yourself, but you're saying at a global level, you think we literally need the body, the craft to be rolled out from whatever secret hangar.
Mainstream to actually believe in this, they would demand physical evidence, and not just pieces of craft and whatever, which we already have. They probably want the actual craft. So, there's apparently craft on the Earth. I've been to various crash sites, and I've been to Aztec, I've been to Corona, I've been to the Roswell crash site. I've actually, physically been there. I've been to many of the crash sites, and it's a strange feeling when you get there, and it's very emotional as well. But we need, and apparently these craft are here. Mm-hmm. So basically, they're in special access programs. Basically, they're hidden away from the purview of everyone except a handful of people. And this story cannot be not real, because how can a lie or a hoax be propagated for 80 years? It just doesn't make sense when you do all the Bayesian logic behind the whole thing. It falls apart. It cannot be a hoax, because how many people can be fooled? How many documents are there out there that that are stating that we have the craft, and the witnesses, and it just goes on and on. The volume of evidence is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And it's a paradox, because you've got all this evidence, but you don't have the physical craft and the body, and it's it seems like an illusion, but it's a reality. It's I don't know. It's just can't explain it. But yeah.
I love that, and this comes up. Just I noticed this when I watch higher profile people in the space, in the know, well connected, that have been into this for years, for decades. It's just so interesting to me that the conversation always ends like this, which is you just laughing, shaking head, saying, I don't know, it's so confusing. And I think that the governments of the world, and these more pertinently perhaps the special access programs, which arguably have the most influence and most knowledge of all this, they know that. They know that there's actually not much that they need to do to cover up the cover-up, right? Like an average person, average skeptic that I speak to, if I mention Roswell, they would literally say, no, it was found to be weather balloons. You know, even though we know that that's complete hogwash, the
latest is it's a mogul balloon, but that the Air Force was saying, we did tell a lie. So it's interesting. The Roswell incident is very interesting. I started studying the Roswell incident and actually researching it in 1987 as a very young researcher. And so that was the very first piece of research that I did. I actually, there was a publication by a guy called Timothy Good, who published the very first documents that came out to the public about the Roswell incident. And one of them was the Eisenhower Briefing document. So I was one of the first people in the world to have actually photocopied that and sent that to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Wow.
I typed up a letter and I photocopied the document and I sent it to them there was no email then, so I sent it to them in a posted letter. And I got a response in less than 2 weeks back from them saying, we don't look at UFOs anymore, blah, 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 blah. So it was a knee-jerk reaction. They were quite shocked that someone actually sent them a document. And a lot of researchers believe that the Eisenhower Briefing document is not a fake document. But I was one of the first people, and probably in the world, to have done that. So that's where I started my research, 1987.
Let's just make that the final point. You've brought it up while I've got you. That's huge. Can you just very, very briefly describe what was the Eisenhower document? How did you get hold of it again? And you then faxed it off to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base?
Yeah, because Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was allegedly where the craft had gone to and the bodies. So I've actually I haven't been to Wright-Pat, but I went to Roswell and they flew it over to Wright-Pat apparently. There were documents that were released in the early 80s via a guy called Timothy Cooper, an unknown person who sent a photographic Kodachrome film to a UFO researcher who developed it and found that these were all classified UFO documents. So this happened in the early 1980s, right? 1980 or 1981, I'm not sure. Could have been very late 70s. So Stan Friedman, who was a legend in UFO research, got involved with Jamie Shandera and another researcher, but they didn't release this to the public. So they were trying to work out whether these were hoax documents or not. So they were official government documents that state that, 2 UFOs crashed in 1947. It names the MJ-12, which is a Majestic 12 group that looked into this, the UFO phenomenon. It describes the craft, it describes the bodies, it describes where they were found. So these are all government documents, right? Yeah. So somebody had released these documents, allegedly not, like assuming that some could have been hoaxed, some could have been real. We don't know. But prior to that, after after these documents were being studied, a researcher in the UK had decided he was given some documents as well by an unknown person. I don't know who gave it to him, and he doesn't disclose it, but he decided to publish a book which was one of the most groundbreaking books in the late 80s, called Above Top Secret. And that book he actually had published the leaked documents in the appendix of the book. And I knew about that. He published it, and there was only one copy in New South Wales, and I had to I had to travel several hundred kilometres to get it. But I got the book, photocopied it, the actual one of the documents, which was the Eisenhower Briefing document. So the Eisenhower Briefing document was a document that briefed President Eisenhower in 1952 about the UFO phenomenon. And that's, so they explained to Eisenhower this is the status about what we know about extraterrestrial life forms that have visited Earth. So
written by supposedly the people from Majestic 12, or?
Correct, yeah. It names the Majestic 12 people. So it would have been James Forrestal and several other people who were, like, one of them was Menzel, who was a skeptic, a debunker, but he was undercover. So he was a cryptologist, and he was actually one of the MJ12. There were 12 people that were actually assigned to keep all this information under wraps. And so this document states them, it names them, it tells you what happened in Roswell. It's actually Corona, which is northeast of Roswell. So I've actually been to the Corona crash site. So basically, this was the first time that these documents were released to the public. So as soon as I got it, the day after, I photocopied it, typed up a letter, and sent it to Wright-Pat.
What did you say in the letter?
I didn't actually even mention UFOs. I said, please look at this document and tell me what you think. That's the basis. But it was like an A4 page typed up letter, and I can't remember what I unfortunately I lost the copy. I did a copy for myself and a copy and I had the original document that they sent me, trying to negate everything, but unfortunately I lost it, and then I sent in a FOIA to Wright-Pat to say, this is a long time ago, and saying, could you please retrieve the document for me? And they said that they didn't keep they would have destroyed all the records from those days. So
fascinating.
Yeah. So I actually went to, I was working in Newcastle at the time, and I showed the people that I was working in a laboratory as a scientist, and I showed everyone in the lab, say, this is the letter that I got from Wright-Pat about this document that I sent them. But that was the very first thing that I did as a researcher in ufology.
How good. That's amazing.
So basically, yeah, and there's documents out there that we're trying to work out whether they're, a lot of researchers are saying a lot of these documents are hoaxed, but I've got a feeling, and I've run them through artificial intelligence, and if you run it through ChatGPT, the original Eisenhower Briefing document, it will state that this is a real document because of the spacing of the letters, the type font. And there's been a lot of work done by researchers, including Stan Friedman, on these documents. And Stan was not a stupid guy. He was a nuclear physicist with a master's degree who looked at all these documents. And currently, also there's another researcher, I forgot his name now. So Bob Woods was the original researcher as well, but Ryan Wood, his son, Bob died last year. I was in Dallas talking about Havana Syndrome, which is related to non-human intelligence, and I actually met him there, but his father was still alive, but he passed away. But the two of them father and son were researching documents, and they've done a huge amount of work on this. And in correlation with Stan's work, they believe that some of these documents are actual real documents that have been released, but the FBI looked at them and just called them bogus without any analysis. And this is what I couldn't understand, is that why would the FBI was given these documents from researchers and said, what do you think? And they just said, they're bogus. That's it. No reasons as to why they thought they were bogus. Where's your evidence to say that they're bogus, you know?
Yeah. And before we wrap up, so just a couple of quick questions on the whole Eisenhower document thing. It's so fascinating. It's starting to ring bells. I'm sure you've talked about it before, so maybe I've seen you talk about it
I've mentioned it in a couple of podcasts that I've done.
Yeah. But that's part of pretty significant UFO history, and so that's really neat. Can you remind me the year that you photocopied this off and sent it off to Wright-Pat?
I think it was 1987 or 1988. I've got the book here in my room still, and it's got 1987 on it.
I'm just looking it up now, so it's top secret Eisenhower.
Above top secret. So that's the book that it was published in, but the actual document was published in 1952.
And where was it published to at the time? Or it was secret?
It was secret.
It was written in 1952.
Classified document.
Gotcha. Okay. And you didn't mention anything about UFOs in your letter to Wright-Pat, but did I hear you say that in their return response letter, they said something about we don't study UFOs or anything? Like, what's the guts of what they said?
They did a brief history about UFOs and how Blue Book. They talked about Blue Book, and they said that the Air Force does not that UFO studies by the United States Air Force terminated on Project Blue Book, and basically that's what I remember of the letter. It had an official United States Air Force stamp on it, like a insignia or whatever. And it was signed by the actual public relations officer of Wright-Pat, which was called Wright Field then, but it changed its name to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But during the Roswell incident, it was called Wright Field. But I actually went to Roswell, and I actually went to the Hangar 84 where the craft was allegedly held, and the hospital where a RAF base hospital where the bodies were located and then moved to the hangar. So the hospital was now demolished, but we went to the hangar and took photographs and took videos and everything.
And you've been to Socorro and everything. Maybe that's
I've been to Socorro. I've been to San Augustine. I've been to Aztec, New Mexico, and the Kingman crash site as well. And the Aurora, Texas crash site of 1898.
Oh, all of the classics.
All the classics,
I would like to maybe get you back in 2 or 3 months if you're willing, Roger, to maybe just chat about your experiences in the US visiting these crash sites, and we could do a little bit of history on ufology. It's so neat. I can just imagine 1987 photocopying it, rushing off, and getting an actual letter back from Wright-Pat.
And the thing is that it was the letter was like they sent it really quickly. Like I thought I was shocked that I got a letter so quickly back. And usually these things take some time, I thought I'll probably get a letter in 6 months or a couple of months, but I think it was within 2 weeks that I got a response.
Can we read anything into that?
I think they thought, where did this guy get this document? Because they probably knew nothing about the publication by Timothy Good. Yeah. And I'm sure my name went down in the CIA or the FBI.
Yeah. Hey, how cool is that? You're in some blacklist somewhere in the depths.
I'm on a blacklist somewhere, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I had 2 NSA guys. This is former NSA guys recording me and taking notes at my Dallas conference last year.
At your which conference?
So I did a talk at the International MUFON Symposium in Dallas, Texas last year, and I got told by a former security officer who identified one guy who actually previously worked with the NSA, who was in the audience. Two guys actually. He recognized one of them because he was a security officer that worked for the NSA, who was actually taking notes and recording me while I was giving my talk on Havana Syndrome.
Oh, I was going to ask why would they be interested, or why you're not much of a threat, or you're not releasing
I don't know.
anything groundbreaking.
I don't know, because of my theory.
If it was
because
to do with
I'm the
Havana
only
Syndrome.
I'm the only one that's come up with a theory that non-human intelligence is involved in Havana Syndrome. So we'll get to that some other time, because your audience probably doesn't know what Havana Syndrome is.
It's been publicly...
It's been out there, yeah.
Certainly your theory on it, pretty niche, put it that way.
It's very niche, yeah.
Very interested to hear that next time, and curious indeed that some NSA folk were there. But let's talk about that next time. I mean, Roger, this has been incredible.
Yes.
You know, I feel like we've scratched 1%. The listeners probably think we've covered the entire history and solved the whole phenomenon. So thanks for that. No, it's been great. It's been a pleasure, Roger. And look, we'll have you back on in a few months if you'll.
Great, Steve. Yeah.
Be willing. Yeah.
Thank you for calling me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, that's great. You have a great sleep, and I'm going to go away with quite a bit to think about, and maybe some new books to order off Amazon.
No worries.
That's great, Roger. Have a good night.